In a dramatic escalation that's sending shockwaves across Latin America, 3 U.S. Navy destroyers are heading toward Venezuelan waters right now, while President Nicolás Maduro has just mobilized 4.5 million militia members in what he's calling the largest civilian defense deployment in Venezuela's history. This isn't just another diplomatic spat. We're witnessing the most significant military buildup in the Caribbean since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the implications could reshape the entire region. Good evening and welcome back. What started as President Trump's war on drug cartels has now become a high-stakes military confrontation that has Venezuela preparing for what Maduro claims could be an imminent invasion. In the past 48 hours, tensions have exploded as the USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sampson, 3 of America's most advanced Aegis guided missile destroyers, began their deployment to waters just off the Venezuelan coast. But this story goes much deeper than warships and rhetoric. To understand why we're on the brink of what could be the first major military confrontation of Trump's second term, we need to examine the chess moves that brought us to this moment. Let's start with the foundation of this crisis. Earlier this month, President Trump signed a classified directive that fundamentally changed how America deals with Latin American drug cartels. For the first time, the administration designated several criminal organizations as foreign terrorist groups, a classification typically reserved for organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The most significant of these designations? The Cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns, which the Justice Department claims is led by none other than Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro himself. These cartels are terrorists, pure and simple. They're flooding our streets with fentanyl, they're destroying American communities, and they're making billions while American families suffer. We're going to treat them like the terrorists they are, and we're going to use every tool at our disposal to stop them. This wasn't just tough talk. The Trump administration immediately doubled the bounty on Maduro's head from $25 million to $50 million, making him one of the most wanted fugitives on Earth. But the real game changer came with what sources describe as Trump's secret directive authorizing military action against these newly designated terrorist cartels. According to multiple defense sources, the current naval deployment involves far more than just 3 destroyers. We're looking at approximately 4,000 sailors and Marines being committed to operations in the southern Caribbean, along with P-8 spy planes, additional warships, and at least 1 attack submarine. The USS Gravely alone is a formidable weapons system, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer equipped with the advanced Aegis combat system capable of simultaneously tracking and engaging multiple targets. When you multiply that by 3, plus submarine and air support, you're looking at more firepower than many nations possess in their entire military. These assets are being deployed in support of counter-narcotics operations in international waters. The mission parameters include intelligence gathering, surveillance, and the capability to conduct targeted operations as deemed necessary by the commander-in-chief. But let's be clear about what this really means. Defense officials have confirmed that these naval assets aren't just there for show, they're positioned to serve as launching platforms for targeted strikes if the order comes down. This is a full-spectrum military deployment disguised as a counter-narcotics operation. Maduro's response has been swift and dramatic. In an emergency address to Venezuela's National Assembly, he announced the largest civilian military mobilization in the country's modern history. What they're threatening to do against Venezuela, regime change, a military terrorist attack, is immoral, criminal, and illegal. We will defend our seas, our skies, and our lands from any empire that dares to threaten our sovereignty. The deployment of 4.5 million militia members isn't just political theater. Venezuela's civilian militia system, established by Hugo Chavez, creates a network of armed volunteers integrated with the regular military. These aren't weekend warriors. Many have received military training and are equipped with small arms and anti-aircraft systems. What makes this particularly significant is the timing. Maduro has also implemented an immediate ban on drone operations throughout Venezuelan airspace, a clear indication that his government fears the U.S. deployment could be the precursor to more aggressive action. To understand the gravity of this moment, we need to look at the historical precedent. The last time the United States deployed this level of naval force near Latin American shores was during the 1989 invasion of Panama to capture Manuel Noriega, another leader the U.S. had indicted on drug trafficking charges. The parallels are striking. Like Maduro today, Noriega was once a useful ally who became inconvenient. Like today's situation, that operation was also justified as counter-narcotics enforcement. And like today, it began with a significant military buildup that officials claimed was merely precautionary. But there are crucial differences. Venezuela in 2025 isn't Panama in 1989. Maduro has the backing of Russia and China, both of whom have significant economic and strategic interests in Venezuelan oil. Venezuela also possesses a much more sophisticated military, including Russian-made S-300 air defense systems and a submarine fleet. The Trump administration's justification centers on what they call an unprecedented flow of fentanyl-laced cocaine from Venezuela into American communities. According to DEA estimates, the Cartel de los Soles has shipped hundreds of tons of cocaine to the United States since the early 2000s, generating billions in revenue that has helped prop up Maduro's regime. The administration argues that traditional law enforcement approaches have failed, and that military action against these narco-terrorist organizations is not just justified, but necessary to protect American lives. The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel that has been flooding American communities with deadly drugs for over 2 decades. President Trump is prepared to use every element of American power to stop this threat and bring those responsible to justice. The regional response has been mixed but increasingly alarmed. Colombian President Gustavo Petro, despite his own complicated relationship with Maduro, issued a stark warning to Trump, calling military action against Venezuela the worst mistake the U.S. could make. China has been more direct, with Beijing issuing statements calling for restraint and warning against unilateral military action in the region. Russia, predictably, has condemned what it calls imperialist aggression and has reportedly placed its own naval assets in the region on higher alert status. Perhaps most significantly, several Latin American nations that have historically supported U.S. policies toward Venezuela are now expressing concern about the military buildup. Even traditionally pro-American governments are worried about the precedent this sets for U.S. military intervention in the region.
Beyond the immediate military concerns, this confrontation has massive economic implications. Venezuela sits atop the world's largest proven oil reserves, and any military action could disrupt global energy markets, already strained by conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. For Trump, this represents both an opportunity and a risk. Success in removing Maduro could be portrayed as a major foreign policy victory and could potentially unlock Venezuelan oil resources for American companies. But failure, or a prolonged military engagement, could become a political liability, especially as the 2028 election cycle approaches. Any military action against Venezuela would immediately spike oil prices globally. We're talking about potentially removing 1.5 million barrels per day from global markets, at least temporarily. The economic implications extend far beyond Venezuela's borders. There are also serious legal questions about the Trump administration's approach. Using military force against what are essentially criminal organizations, even ones designated as terrorist groups, pushes the boundaries of presidential war powers. Congress has not authorized military action against Venezuelan cartels, and international law experts argue that attacking another nation's territory based on drug trafficking accusations could violate the UN Charter. The administration's response has been that they're operating under existing counterterrorism authorities and that the actions are taking place in international waters. As of right now, those 3 U.S. destroyers are within 36 hours of reaching their operational positions off the Venezuelan coast. Meanwhile, across Venezuela, militia units are conducting mobilization drills, and the government has begun distributing weapons to civilian defense groups. The next 48 to 72 hours are absolutely critical. Intelligence sources suggest that the U.S. naval deployment includes capabilities for electronic warfare, signals intelligence, and precision strike operations. The question isn't whether America has the capability to take action, it's whether Trump will give the order. Maduro, for his part, appears to be betting that the costs of military action, both political and economic, will ultimately deter the United States. His strategy seems to be raising the stakes high enough that even Trump will think twice about military intervention. Let's game out the most likely scenarios. Scenario 1. This remains a show of force, with U.S. ships maintaining a presence to interdict drug shipments and gather intelligence while avoiding direct confrontation with Venezuelan forces. Scenario 2. Limited military action targeting specific cartel infrastructure or leadership, similar to the targeted strikes we've seen against ISIS leaders. Scenario 3. Full-scale military intervention aimed at regime change, which would represent the most significant U.S. military action in Latin America since the Cold War. Each scenario carries enormous risks. Even limited action could spiral into broader conflict, especially given Venezuela's alliance relationships with Russia and China. And any military action would likely create a massive refugee crisis, with millions of Venezuelans potentially fleeing to neighboring countries and toward the U.S. border.
This Venezuela crisis represents the first major test of Trump's America First foreign policy in his second term. It's one thing to threaten military action during campaign rallies. It's another to actually deploy destroyers and prepare for potential combat operations. For Trump personally, this is high-stakes politics. Success could cement his reputation as a strong leader, willing to take decisive action against America's enemies. But miscalculation could lead to exactly the kind of foreign entanglement that Trump has historically criticized. The Venezuela situation also tests Trump's relationship with key allies and adversaries. How China and Russia respond to U.S. military action near their sphere of influence could set the tone for broader great power competition throughout his second term. What we're witnessing right now is the collision of domestic politics, international law, and military strategy in one of the most volatile regions in the world. Trump's war on cartels has morphed into something approaching actual war, and the next few days could determine whether this remains a tense standoff or escalates into the first major military conflict of the new administration. The stakes couldn't be higher. For Venezuela, this could mean the end of the Maduro regime and potentially the beginning of a new chapter in the country's troubled history. For the United States, it could mean either a foreign policy triumph or a costly military entanglement in America's backyard. For the millions of Venezuelans caught in the middle, it could mean the difference between continued authoritarian rule and the chaos that often follows military intervention. One thing is certain, the next chapter of this story will be written in the Caribbean waters, where American destroyers and Venezuelan militia forces now face each other across an increasingly narrow divide. The world is watching, the region is holding its breath, and President Trump holds the key to what happens next. What do you think? Should the United States take military action against the Maduro regime, or are the risks too high? How do you see this crisis playing out? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and your insights often shape future coverage. And if you want to stay ahead of breaking news like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This Venezuela situation is developing rapidly, and I'll be bringing you updates as they happen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.